In this video I show you how I sound design for animation. This is an in-depth breakdown of my contribution to the latest Heavyocity competition for Gravity 2. I will show you how I created the signature sound from the raw source recordings to the final design, and I also show you all the 125 tracks of sound design that makes up the full redesign. So it's basically a really juicy 1 hour sound design tutorial that you have in front of you. But before we dive into all of that, if you want a couple of tips along the way for how you can become a better storyteller with sound design, I have a free guide for you linked in the description below. This covers 9 ways of how you can tell better stories with sound design. So go ahead and download that, it's totally free of charge of course, and use it when you do your own redesigns. And now let's dive into the sound design. So the assignment from Heavyocity was to create a signature sound that evolves over time. It should start playing here at the beginning where we see these like really cool textures coming out, and then it should land here one more time when the final logo plays, and over time in between there it should play multiple times and evolve over time. And when I looked through this, I got really inspired by the graphics of everything, really cool movement and like particle swells and small like pulsating movements and circular movements, and I thought that, well, some kind of otherworldly feeling to the signature sound should work, but it should also feel like grounded. We had like this big metal construction that moves around and stuff, so it should feel grounded, like something that actually can be in a world and not too synthetic, but some kind of sci-fi vibe to it. So my idea with this was to start out with creating the signature sound and then design all of the other parts of the like full redesign just around those signature sounds. So I marked out a couple of places and I felt like 4 places should work for the signature sound, and then I started to design that. So what I did was that I started with just a raw organic recording of a door that sounded like this. So nothing super complex or anything, it's just a small wooden door recorded with an Zoom H5, and it has like this cool gnarly character and then the tonal thing in the end. It almost feels like some kind of jazz playing thing. That might be why I got like attracted to it, but it has a really cool vibe. I didn't want this like too gnarly part, I just want to focus on the tonal part. So I edited into this. And then I took that and stretched it out, so I just played it at half speed, and then it sounded like this. So when you play it at half speed, it also reduces the pitch, and it just pitches down 1 octave. So now it plays it half speed and 1 octave down. And that became the source that I would work with. And then I started to process that. So I started out with elastic pitch, so I pitched it down even further, but this is with an algorithm, so it doesn't stretch the sound at all. And now it sounds like this. Just deeper down. And then I have 1 more elastic pitch, but this is automated, so it's this automation line that you can see here, and it's just the dry wet of this. So in the beginning here, I pitched down the sound 1 more octave, so it would sound like this here. So it doesn't affect anything, but that's in the idea of have it evolve over time. I pitch it really far down here, and as you see, the final version is actually stretched out even further, so it plays even slower and pitched even further down. But the idea was to just have it evolve over time like this, so that's why I had this elastic pitch here. Next up is just an EQ, nothing crazy at all, just removing some of the low end rumble. Then I have Raum. This is a really cool creative reverb. I often use it to create feedback loops within it, and when you use the pre-delay in here, you can pitch those feedback loops and you can create really cool resonance tones within different sounds. I use this very subtle in this, so with Raum it sounds like this. So a tiny bit of reverb, a tiny bit of movement to it. It's super subtle here, but later I will bypass this and you will hear what it creates for the full sound. So we get back to that a little bit later. And the same is true for the next plugin. This is All Pass Phase. It's just a free plugin. It's very similar to Disperser from Kiloheart. So if you have that, this is basically the same kind of thing. For some reason I use this instead of Disperser in this case. Just use whatever you gravitate to. It doesn't matter if it's a Disperser or this one. But this Disperser thing is really great for transient heavy things. So it reacts really weird on these tonal sustained sounds. And it creates super weird artifacts that when we listen to it now probably will not sound that good. But as with the Raum reverb that we just looked at, this creates really cool artifacts that we will get to use later in the chain. So with this, it sounds like this. We can hear how it like flutters around and creates these weird pops and glitches and stuff. It's a part of the process. After that I have just an inflator that pushes up the volume basically and clips it a little bit. After that I have Filter Freak. So I want to, the idea of the signature sound is to have this like big, massive, deep signature sound that like fits the visuals that we saw like in this big space. So I use a filter here to cut off the high end of the sound, so we push the sound back in the landscape a bit. And then I have modulated the frequency here depending on the input, so it will like move up and down and move around the volume. So with Filter Freak it sounds like this. So you can see it just goes up and down. And then we have a really aggressive native compressor from Reaper. It just squashes the sound basically, nothing else. After that, big reverb, Black Hole from Eventide, fantastic for these kinds of sounds. An EQ that just cuts out some of the high end that the digital drum compressor created. And then a safety limiter in the end. And that doesn't do anything basically. So the sound now is this. And if you now would remove Raum and All Pass Phase, it would sound like this. And that's fine, or absolutely, but it doesn't have that weird tension and that like squeezes and grabs it and tears it apart a little bit. So if I play it with Raum and All Pass Phase one more time. It feels like less steady and feels like it has a bit more tension to it and you don't exactly know what to expect out of it. And that's a good thing for signature sound because it gravitates you. If you have it just plain and simple, plays really steady, it doesn't create a tension and that interesting excitement to it that like grabs your ears, because you can immediately just hear, okay, that's the tonal sound and it sounds like this. But when we have these like weird glitches and stuff, that creates like this interesting feeling to it. So then I just took that sound and edited in different ways, stretched it out in the beginning, used that first elastic pitch to pitch it down in the beginning, doesn't pitch it out the second time. Here I pitch it up one more time, but I have this layer going on underneath here again, and then another one here that's more edited that I'd used a little bit different for the final result. And what I did here was that I just bounced out all of these, took those samples and started to play with them and edit them further, and I will dive into that now when we check out the full redesign of it. So just remember, this was the process of creating those sounds, and now we'll see how it works in context of the visual design. Alright, so here is the full session for this project. Here we have the signature sound creation track that we just looked at, and I just bounced that out and worked with that. So I have the first signature here placed in the beginning here, the second signature here placed here, the third one plays here, and the fourth one plays here. And in between here we have all the additional sound design that goes on. All of these tracks are going into this group track up here, and this is basically the master for this project. I have a C4 multiband compressor, an inflator, and then just a Pro L limiter. And it nothing crazy, it just manages the dynamics of the full design a little bit. Up top here we have the video, and that's about it. So in each of these tracks we have additional tracks underneath. So this is a group with all of these sounds in here, and that creates this like orb approaching scene basically. So that's true for all of these additional sounds in each of them. And the reason that I have it laid out like this is that I really like to see what sounds collide and what not. So basically, if I would open up this and we would play with the idea that I would have the signature sound here on track 5 in this case, but this would be placed on track 87 far down here somewhere, and this would be on like track 34. I would have one track up here and then the layer of that track somewhere down here, and the other one like even further down. So I really like to just layer them up together where they play in time, and that creates like this falling template of different sounds coming in together. And then I can easily open up one of these and see what sounds collide, what sounds complement each other, what do I need to edit and stuff. As you see, there's not much processing going on. It's way more automation and editing in a product like this, for me at least. So I really like to work like this because I get like a really easy and manageable overview of the full product and see what's going on in each part of it. But that's just my way to do it. If you haven't tried it, I highly suggest you try it. But if you have a different way to work with this that you really like and manage the tracks, let me know in the comments below. I would really love to hear how you are doing it, because I always want to learn new stuff basically. So let's start out from the beginning and start with the first signature sound. And since the assignment from Heavyocity was to emphasize the full design on these signature sounds, and it was really clear that one of them should be played in the beginning, I want to play the sound without any distractions or any layers or anything the first time. So that plays a solo by itself, and the full design of this part sounds like this. So as soon as this signature sound starts to like tailor off, I have two layers coming in and like complement that. And the idea behind them is to like paint a little bit of the landscape that we're in. When we see the first big orb like moving by, that feels like the big slow signature sound. But after that we get into some like darkness, and then we get like this taste of a big landscape. We see the orb really far away. So I want to continue like this feeling of something is big and far away, and I have this like low drone for that. But I also want some kind of contrast to the signature sound. That's a really common way to create interesting sound design in your designs, to all the time think of what way can I contrast different things, because that's like what catches our ears basically. If something new happens that wasn't there before, that instantly draws their attention to it. But if everything is kind of the same, it starts to just blur away. So if you constantly work with different contrast in different ways, from sustained elements to like shorter elements, from noisy elements to tonal elements, from dark elements to bright elements, and constantly think about these like different ways of sculpt your sounds, you can create really interesting redesigns and sound designs that way. So since the signature sound is really low, dark and slow, I want something to complement that and contrast that, and that turned out to be this sound. So it's a higher sound, it has more harmonics than the first one, and it complements each other. And it works really well with this low drone. And as you see, both of these sounds are from Boom 1, and you will see a lot of boom sound throughout the full design. I use them I think it's basically just boom sounds, honestly, but it's from the construction kits, and if it's designed ones, I have designed the construction kits, but I'll also use designed ones and edit them down and lay them together, but you will just see them constantly throughout the process. So after that, we have the orb approaching. So in this part, we start to pick up a little bit of more speed and like momentum of the video or the movie. It's just like any kind of movie. We start out with an introduction to where are we, like where is this set, what is the like playground for the movie, and what are the main characters. We see this like big landscape, and then we have the main orb that's like the main character. But now we're picking up a little bit more speed and a little bit more movement to it. First it was just ambiances, but now we have more stuff going on. So I play through this and you will hear what I mean. So we have this orb approaching us, and I want to emphasize that with just building up the tension of it and just have some kind of hit to it. And then when like this like shimmery like particles comes out, I want to emphasize that with some sound design. So basically the first part here is this impact and the build-up. So nothing super crazy, it's just a couple of whooshes and a sub boom basically. And then we have this. So it's a cool contrast in between those two layers, where we have this like liquidy feeling of this layer, and it's a very low layer, and then we have a different higher shimmery noisier layer, and together they work really well to describe that opening up and all those particles coming out from the orb. And down here we had that same kind of drone airy tonal sound that we heard in the beginning. So it like glues it and ties it back to the beginning and just makes it feel like we're in the same kind of landscape, even though things start to like pick up speed now. So all together one more time. And all of this is just edited, designed sounds from Boom, basically, from Arcane Forces and Boom 1, and also from Cinematic Motion. And I have redesigned them, and I have like resampled them and repitched them a little bit, did a bit of automation, but it's basically most picking your sounds, edit them and layer them together to create the motion and the feeling that you want, basically. And after this, we're picking up even more speed when we're going into this orb opening up scene. So now we're getting into even more energy territory. We're basically building it up from the ambience first signature sound to the like a little bit more with the orb approaching, but now we will like basically split the orbs, and we will have a bigger impact of it that complements the different other stuff and also contrasts it. It's like a stairwell of dynamics. So we start really slow, building up, and then we'll continue building up into a release part where we have the second signature sound that comes a little bit further down the line. But this is just a part of this building up the energy in it, and we will continue to complement the visuals with the design. So this part sounds like this. So it's this massive ripping impact that we have in the middle here. So these are edited more boom sounds, but they complement each other. So we have this coming in the beginning with this build up that's also supported from the tails of this orb approaching tails here. And then we have a different impact coming in here, a different here, and a sub boom here. So let's listen to them one by one. And this one. So this has more of a tonal character. And this is more of a noisy character. And this comes in with a ripping energy just in the end, where and not in the beginning, so they don't collide there. And then we have this one that doesn't have that impact. It has more of that stereo energy that comes in, and we have the low sub boom here. So it's a lot about picking your sounds and make them work together and complement the story of what you're trying to tell and the visuals. So listen back to them together. And if we listen to that together with the orb approaching scene, so we get the full scene together. So they work really well together, but it just builds up on that energy. And next part after here, we have some pulsating energy. So this pulsating energy part is almost like a little bit of a plateau, and then we just ramp it up. So we kind of lure the audience a little bit. We had this ripping energy, and then we take one step back, and we just to have something to build from, to move it up into the next big one. And that's where we play the next signature sound. And we will see that in the visuals too. We had a like split of atoms basically, and then we have like almost a little bit of silence and a little bit of peace, and just everything stands a little bit still, and then we see all these like pulsating small circular movements, and then everything starts to pick up, and we just ramp into this big next hit basically. So let's take a listen to it, and we just go through the layers. So we start out with just standing still, but I have all these like small dots moving here, and I wanted to pick up on that. So we have the big one stands kind of still, but we have like this, and that's the first layer that we have here. And then the second one is a higher layer with some modulation, bits of movement, but not that like clear, but it complements each other really well. And then we have another layer coming in a little bit later, when we just start to tell the audience that something is going to happen. We are picking up speed. It sounds like this. It's just a little bit of like energy, and just telling that where some stuff is in movement here that you don't see yet, but it's coming basically. And then we have this build-up layer that sounds like this. When it starts to like approach and everything starts to move faster. And then we have more of a whoosh sound that leads into the impact. And then the ripping, like this is like the whoosh leads into it, and this is like a faster whoosh that leads into the big impact, and that combines with a sub boom. So lower layer with some pulsating motion, a modulated texture ambience movement layer. So basically a pulsating low layer, a higher layer with some modulation and movement, but not in the same way as the first one. Then we have one layer that just comes in and makes just a statement that something is gonna move around. And then we have the long build up, the short build up, and then the really short whoosh into impact combined with the sub boom. So once again, all of these layers have different purposes. I don't have much of processing on these, a little bit of frequency echo going on here, a little bit of snap peep, and just play around with the stereo spread, basically a little bit of timeless on this. Nothing crazy at all. It's mostly, as I said before, editing the chosen layers and just have a vision and an idea what you're trying to do, and pick the right sound for those moments. So after that, we have the next signature sound comes up. So this signature sound is basically a version of the first one we heard exactly in the beginning, but I want this to be a slightly more aggressive one, a slightly like not that super low. So it's a version of that, but slightly evolved towards a higher, even more fully fledged out signature sound. So this is played at the same like speed, so it plays half speed from the original one, but we don't have the octave down on top of that. So the sound is this. But then I want to complement that with something that has a bit more like aggression, a bit more ominous feeling to it. So I found this. This is like some creature aggressive growl. But it felt a little bit too much like monster sound in order to work as a layer with my signature sound. So I did a little bit of processing to it. I denoised it a little bit with Spectral Dynamics. I added some delay to it and a reverb, and then it sounded like this. I really like to work with these like sources from animals or like sources to create creatures with, because you have so much like emotion in them and so much performance in them. And when you then start to process them and create ambiences and different other sounds with them, like pass-bys or weapon sounds for that matter, also you have so much character still left in them, even though it doesn't sound like an animal or a creature sound anymore. So that together with this sounds like this. And this just creates that like ominous, weird feeling to it. And then we have one final layer here. And this is just this like moving propeller spin that I wanted to like play around with and see what I can do. So I made this sound. And it's just really clear that we have that propeller movement. It's almost like a little bit cliche and over the top when you listen to it like this, but together with other sounds. It's almost necessary to have that like over the top, like really clear stuttery sound to have it cut through the other stuff going on. And a weird thing that you see here, or maybe not that weird, but it's not super common, that you have both audio and MIDI on the same track. So what I do here is that I use multipass to trigger a curve that modulates an LFO that modulates a cutoff, which creates this like ramp in speed. And since I have this triggered by a MIDI, I can have this set wherever I want, and the trigger will start where I place this. And you achieve this in Reaper by choosing free item position, and then you can have these on top of each other or underneath each other, or however you want to have them. So it's a really neat feature in my opinion, especially with the Kilohertz products, where I often want to trigger different stuff with MIDI, so I have a really clear trigger when I want to start some kind of modulation, some kind of motion somewhere. I use MIDI triggers for that, and this is really neat, because otherwise you would need to have like multiple tracks and set up sidechain routing and stuff like that. And when you use free item position, you don't have to do anything of that. So I really like this. Try it out if you like. It's really neat. So after this signature sound, we have some energy spark coming up. So next part here is the energy spark part, and it's kind of what I think of, you know, when you see a movie and it's like when the hero becomes the hero, he trains like really fast and he learns all these new skills and stuff, and then all of a sudden he goes from like a farmer and then he's like this ninja assassin superhero guy. That's basically what I think of here. We have like painted a picture in the beginning with the ambiences, and then we have like the movement and stuff that happens and all the problems going on and blah blah blah. And now we get into like, all right, how to solve all this. Because what we start out with here is this like spark of energy here, and that like our hero basically. And then we take that spark and it evolves and it starts to learn new skills. And then it starts to add more skills, and starts like things like starts to come together more and more, and then it just bursts into this eventual like massive energy buildup over here. And we will start that like from a really small point. So we paint the picture of the farmer, so to speak, the simple, the little thing, like the small light in the big darkness, basically. So we start out with a transition from this into this like farmer boy spark part here. So the sound altogether sounds like this. So we build it up from that small spark. So we start out with two whooshes that just transitions from this propeller thing into the spark. Just two very different ones. A slower one with more stereo feeling, and one slower one. So they work well together. And then we have this like low drone layer. And this is to paint a picture of this like just darkness around. So I want the darkness, and then I want this like spark in the middle. So here is the darkness. And then we have the spark here. And then we start to like build that up when the farmer starts to learn all the new skills basically, and we build up this like energy movement here. We just add different layers to complement the visuals. So here we have this like sparks that comes out from the sides. And another one for that. And that stays in that with its sparkling energy, like really electric energy, just stays in there and just adds to the buildup of the energy. And then we have these two like more electric spark hits basically. That has way more tonal character than this one, so they complement each other. And then we have this. Just a different texture in the build-up. And then we have all these like stereo movement when all these like things start to come from the side, and like it's almost like we go from this really like narrow stereo field into this like things start to happen. Our hero starts to evolve into this like ninja massive warrior thing. Then we have like the final whooshes leads into the big impact in the end. A slower one, a faster one, and just a tonal like complement to everything else, and then the final like low boom. So together they sound like this. And then we continue that like journey that we have started with this farmer that turns into the super ninja in the next section. And this was like the noisier part of it, the darker part. And then the next part will be slightly more tonal to contrast this. Again, if you just try to play around with the contrast all the time, you will get a really interesting and very dynamic design, even though you're just using sound design for it. So next part is this tonal movement part that just focuses on that. So here is the tonal movement part, and this is, as I said, basically a continuation of the journey that we started with the spark in the middle. But now we're going into like this part where the hero will basically go towards having his first fight, like the first real fight to his opponent basically. And we will build it up even more and make it even more fully fledged and like a little bit softer, more powerful, rounder sound. So we'll try to complement the first and contrast the first part where we had slightly more noisier with electricity and noise and different stuff. And now when all the lights starts to light up here up in the rig, we will complement that with more like softer tonal elements and just start to build on that power basically, and then build that up into the big first like final ramp of energy before we have the next release with the next signature sound. And so this is like the pre-match. This is just before our hero goes into the ring and have his first like real match basically. So this part sounds like this. So we're building it up towards here, and here we will continue. This part from here is the next section. This is like the real first fight, and we will have this like really massive transformation sound design thingy, and this is just tailoring off into that. So let's focus on this part here, and the first layer here is these like movements and comes in from the sides here that we started out in the last part, just continues over here. So we have that movement from the sides, but it tails off during this section. So we continue to have that stereo movement in this, because now we start to pad it out with a lot of tonal elements, and we don't want everything to stand still. We still want that like energy flowing feeling and movement and forward motion. So here is the tonal element that starts to come in. Basically a low drone, a higher drone, really high drone with a little bit more movement in it, and another one. And these are set really like in the middle to play around with this laser beam that we have here. And then we have some movement. We have like a charge up in the beginning here when the laser beam starts here and then locks in place here. So we have first the ramp up where this like laser beam comes up. And then we have the like lock in place basically. So this is like the part where our hero have learned a lot of these skills, and then he suddenly opens up to like these massive opportunities and he realizes how powerful he is basically. So when the lightning laser beam touches this big part here and everything lights up, we have like a big locked in place sound, and this is the locked in place sound. So it's basically that everything falls into place, and he realizes that, wow, I'm meant to so much more. I'm basically a semigod or demigod or something like that. So it's just this like switch, and we have like this big lock in place sound to just signalizing that. So if we have those two together, and then we have these sounds. Just like an energy movement over time, a long whoosh sound. And then we have 3 more layers down here that has this like pulsing energy into them. And this is like the excitement. And also we also complement the pulsating of this energy beam in the middle here. So the pulsating sounds are these. So together they sound like this. And this is like the big last ramp up before we have the next release. So we're building up the tension even more, and then we're releasing it just after that. So this next part is like the first real boss fight for our hero. This is like a transforming movement and the last final piece of tension before we release the tension and play the third signature sound. So the hero has evolved into this massive warrior now, and he's like in the ring with his first like boss, and everything sounds like this. So just tons and tons of movement, and they're throwing jabs at each other and everything. So we have these visuals of the full like metal rig just moving, and everything is swirling in the visuals. And then we have the idea of this like hero that evolves basically. So I want like to add as much movement as possible, complement tonal element with noise element, and just have everything less playing around on each other. And we have this big massive transforming moment. So the layers sound like this. We start out with just a transitional whoosh from the last part where we were in this into this part. So it's just the first whoosh to go from over there. And then we have some tonal glitchy like flickering sounds. And then some more like stuttering sounds, and I played around with the stereo field and denoised it a little bit and just played around with it. So together those two sounds like this. So you can see that the editing is really important here. The flickering sound comes first, and then the stuttering sound, and then the flickering sound, and then they just play off each other. And then we have this sound. Really really cool like summoning sound from Magic Arcane Forces. I did a little bit of EQing to it and added an inflator to it, but nothing crazy at all. This is just a slower version, so this plays underneath the full other two sounds basically. So the other two can play around on top of this, and they have different speed and different motion. So together with those two, they sound like this. And then we have this layer. Another one that just complements this layer. So they basically play at the same time, but this is a way noisier one. So together those two sounds like this. And then it comes by itself in the end. And then we have these stinger impacts. With just basically two big moments. And then we have a riser. So this is like the final, just fill out all frequencies, add as much excitement and energy to it as you possibly can. And then you release it just here. So it just creeps up underneath all the movement and everything that happens. And then we have a drone in the low end here that just sets the tone for the whole scene. So those two sounds like this. So nothing crazy, everything together. And I mean, creating a scene like this is just playing around with different movement and see what fits. And just throwing a lot of different sounds at it, start to edit them, start to can this work, can this work? Oh, this is really cool. This has this high flickering tonal sound. Well, in order to have some kind of contrast to that, what can I have then? Can I have some sounds like here we're building on contrast in between these two layers, that this plays first and this, and then this, and then this, and then this. But then we have these two layers that plays on top of each other, but they have different characters. And then we have all these layers that has so much that they like play off each other, one sound and then the next sound and then the next sound. But then you contrast all of those with these two sounds that are very sustained and long, but these two have different roles in the game also, because this is just a steady long drone sound and this has full frequency range of rising sound. So all of these like complement each other and contrast each other in different ways, and just start with something and then, okay, this is really cool, I like this. How can I complement or contrast this sound? What does it need more? Then when you have those two in place, what can I do to contrast or complement these two? And you just start to build it up like that. And you just ask the question all the time, how can I contrast or complement? Does it need to be complemented? Does it need to be contrasted? What do I need? If you have trouble coming up with this, see what happened before. How can I complement that or build on that or contrast that? And you start to get ideas how to like start to create these different scenes. And when you have started creating them, things start to like fall into place basically. So after this, we just released all the tension with the third signature sound. So this next part is very much about releasing the energy, but it's also about playing the signature sound the third time. So it's a moment of power, but also like a big breathing out moment. And in the visuals, we have like these like really cool glittering shimmering things that start to evolve, and we have the darkness behind it, and it's just kind of slow and it turns into this pulsating movement here. So this signature section here is covering this like big breathing out moment, and then we will cover the pulsating movement in the energy buildup coming up here in the next one. So the idea here is that I have taken the signature sound and now we're playing it in the original speed. So the first time it was pitched down 1 octave and played half speed. The second time it's played half speed, and now we're playing it at the original speed, but we will complement it with a big impact for more energy, a lower tail, and 2 shimmery high layers. And then we'll build up the energy with some whooshes before that. So we start out with just listening to the full signature sound here. So the build up here, the whoosh before it, sounds like this. So we have that like high shimmery thing that kind of like lets the audience know what's about to come, because that's what happens over here. We have this like shimmering things, so it just complements the stuff that will happen here really nice. And this is a longer one, and then we have the shorter one here with the double transient that works really well. And after that we have the big signature sound. And then we have two noise layers just panned out left and right, just to complement this and complement the visuals. So together with the signature sound, they sound like this. And then we have a big trailer hit, just massive. And then a lower tail. It has that high resonance things in it also, but it's very much to complement these high layers. So the signature sound, the hit, and the complementary layer sounds like this. And everything together again. And we have this moment of breathing out before we go into the next build-up into the final battle of this short movie. And the next one is just called Energy Build-Up. So this part is basically, we had the big breathe out and release of the tension with the signature sound, and now we have the pulsing energy, and our hero in this like imaginary story basically thought that he was invincible after defeating the first like big boss in the boss fight, but now he realized that that's not of course the case, and things start to go really bad for him. And we will build up this energy from this like just release that we had here and just breathing out, everything is fine. But now we have some dark energy coming in again, and things start to be really bad, and we're just building up massive energy into, we're getting into this like everything is just burns basically, and then into this dark black hole that we have here where our hero falls. But of course he will be rejuvenated and he will come back and he will conquer in the end. But this is the part where we build up the energy into this like massive drop. The part where I had the transformation part over here, we had the hero succeeding. But in this part we have the bad energy succeeding basically, and we're building up to this dark hole. That's like the idea about this part. And we will do this and complement the pulsating energy that we see here. And then we will go in with a big hit where we transition over here. And then we will use like different vocalizations and different textures and rising elements to build up the energy into the massive big drop here where we just fall into the darkness. So let's take a listen to the full design. So we're trying to like approach with different textures over time. We have this first pulsating energy like sound. Starts slow and then ramps up in speed. And this is a snap heap that does a lot of frequency shifting, and then we have a different snap heap that creates all the weird modulation and all the movement to the sound. And those are triggered with this MIDI, the trick that I showed you earlier. So I can start this trigger in here with the same, and we have all the different layers on the same track. So we have this as a higher layer and this as a lower layer on the same track, and everything is controlled with this MIDI. So it's really neat workflow. And then we have this complementary sound here. Just really fast textures to complement the slower pulsating texture. Lower, darker sound. Weird tonal sound. And all of these like complement each other in different ways and comes in different parts. A different pulse layer that complements this first one. So a lot of stereo movement in this one that we don't have in the first one. So I just tried to pick different layers to fill out everything, because in the end we will basically go into noise where everything like explodes and the hero basically dies. And I will do that with having different textures coming in with different like characters and different attributes. The next one, really high one. Next one. Really weird movement that really complements the visuals. And then we have this that's more of like a vocalization basically. So all of these texture layers together sounds like this. And then we have just a big boom. And then we have some rising elements here. Another rising. A third one. Fourth one. That is really horrible. But as you see, even these two complement each other really well. This is very organic and grounded, and this is very sci-fi-ish. This is just a pitched up version of that. So it's tons of layers in this scene, and they are like almost like just building on top of each other. They are not like really smart and plays around, and when this doesn't play, I play. They are just building and building and building, and we're building up this massive energy into basically noise. So let's take a final listen to the full scene. And I do all of this because I want the feeling of darkness when we hit here. So sometimes you do designs in this part that doesn't make sense basically on its own, but when you have it evolve into something else, it builds up. Because when you want to do these, like say for example someone runs from on a rooftop and he will jump, and you want to make the jump with silence. In order to make the silence be audible, so to speak, you need to build up the energy with sound, so you have something to remove, so you have that lift up afterwards. And this is the same idea. So we're building up the energy so we have something to remove in order to get the next part to feel like darkness. Because when we listen to the next part now, you will basically hear just a big like short boom, and then it's just silence. And that's what we're building towards. This is when our hero falls, and we need to build up that energy, and we need to like create that chaos in order to make that depth and darkness afterwards. So we dive into that now. So this is basically where our hero falls into darkness, and the only thing that I'm like thinking of is to ramp up the final energy and then just have that short impact into darkness. And then of course light comes after. So let's have a listen to that. So it's nothing super crazy. We have made the heavy lifting before with building up that chaos in the last section. So we build it up, and now we just have to release it basically. The tricky part here is to make the silence, because as a sound designer it's kind of hard to not add sounds to different things, but sometimes it's more effective to just remove it, and that can be a tricky part. But it's on the face of it, it's really simple. Just let it go basically. So building up it sounds like this. So different whooshes, different impact, they complement each other, they have different character. We have the low boom here, the weird like stereo field and like tonal character of that. Really just sharp mid-range hit. More of a whooshy feeling. Longer whooshy feeling. And just the long basic whoosh, noisy whoosh sound. So all of those into the impact sounds like this. And then we have the light that comes after. So here is the first layer of those. So just a shimmery high tail. Just something that just like paint a picture of that we're still in this deep hole and we're trying to get out of it. And also complements the big darkness and vast depth in the visuals. And another higher shimmery layer. Together that sounds like this. And all of the layers together one more time. So nothing super crazy. As I said, we have done the heavy lifting before. Now it's just to let it go, basically. And the next section now, we start to build it up into the final signature sound and the final battle for our imaginary hero. So this part is about where the hero has fallen, but the lights come back to him basically. So he gets the energy back, he starts to ramp, and then he makes the final stab. He starts to ramp up in energy and get the energy and excitement back, and he just runs towards the enemy and basically stabs him and conquers. So in the visuals here, we have this like slow-mo and big darkness, and then we transition into, we see the big gravity logo and we see all the spinning. So we will first transition into when we see the big logo, and then we will start to ramp up the speed of that, and then we will just ramp up the last final energy basically. So it's kind of a simple part, it's just one thing to do, go from the transition and ramp up the energy basically. So it sounds like this. And then we will have this final like last ramp into the last signature sound in the next signature sound scene here. But the sounds here is just doing the transition into the next scene here in the beginning. So those two whooshes together with this boom. And then I have this morphing sound that I have denoised quite a lot. Creates really cool textures. And then I have this synth patch here that is resampled from this. So it's basically, I just checked how long is this area here. It's about 8 seconds or so, and I just did a curve over time, and then I have that curve modulating this LFO, and this LFO modulates different parameters. So this speed of this will ramp up over time where I want it and then go down. And this modulates all of this different parameters, the frequency shifter, comb filter, everything in there. And that creates this wobbling effect that speeds up and then comes down. And you have full control over it within FacePlant. So it's really, really nice tool to create these kinds of sounds with. I resampled it just because I want to save a little bit of CPU, because that patch turned out to be really heavy on the CPU. So this sounds like this. And together with that and a different whoosh that comes in the end here. It's really cool because this has this like gnarly start to it. It's almost like, will it move? Yes, it will. And then it starts. So it has that like cool start of it. and then the tonal rising element, and then combined with this stuttering LFO thing that just ramps up in speed. Works really well. And then we have this, and this is the thing that I have talked about earlier, where I trigger a host with MIDI. So I trigger this curve here. This is the same idea that I had in the faceplant patch, but just a different sound. This sounds like this. So in this track we have 2 different audio files and 1 MIDI file. These are panned out hard left, hard right with this like noisy feeling. So we have this stem here, the faceplant patch in the middle, or basically like stereo field. And then we have like the wideness from this sound. But the idea is kind of to complement each other. So all of these sounds like this. And this is basically the power. We have this big moving part in the end, like it looks super powerful and heavy. And then we have all the lights and the shimmering stuff, and that is this track basically. So I just different tracks and different sound complements and tells the story of different things in the visuals. So all of this together sounds like this. And then we just have the final signature sound and the final ramp up of energy into that in the next section. All right, so this is the final moment. This is what we have built up towards all the time from the get-go, and the assignment from Heavyocity was to land on this final logo with the signature sound. So now we will hear a fully fledged version of it. I have taken the signature sound that we created before I started to do all the other sound design, but I have also duplicated it and layered it on top of each other to create this final version of it. So basically we're ramping up the energy into this final logo with 2 whooshes. We have the signature sound playing in 3 layers. We have a boom and a hit, and that's basically it. So it's nothing super complicated here. It's just to do what we have built up to do all the time, basically. So it sounds like this. So 1 shorter whoosh, 1 longer whoosh. And then we have the signature sound. So this is the main layer here in the middle. Then we have a high layer of that with, you see, 2 elastic pitch. So one is 100% wet, 1 octave up, but the second one is just 5% wet and another 1 octave up. So it's adding 2 octaves on top of this first one. But the second one of those is just tiny bit, because then otherwise it's just piercing basically. And then we have 1 layer that plays really slow, so it's stretched out to play half speed. The same thing that we had in the first signature and the second signature sound. So in order to make that work with timing, I have edited that so you can see there's a cut in here. And this is a super simple but really effective. You can stretch out sound and you cut out the parts in the middle that you don't want, and then just collapse them and glue them together to create slower sounds but with the same timing basically. So this sounds like this. And works well with this. And they are not exactly matched, and that's not the purpose either. It feels way more organic when you have a little bit of off timing in between them, and especially when the lower layer comes a little bit after the higher layer, it just feels natural. So all of the 3 layers of the signature sounds together sounds like this. And then we have a sub boom and a trailer hit. And everything together one more time. So just a big finale basically, and this is what we have built up to all the time, as I said. Alright, that was an hour-long sound design tutorial. I hope you had as much fun as I had when I created it. If you want to dive even deeper into this black hole of sound design, I have a video for how you can create your showreel over here, and I also have a video for how you can use your iPhone to create sound design over here. So go ahead and pick your poison, and I see you in the next one.